there's other composers right now who are really doing pivotal work in the classical music industry or community. Jessie Montgomery, we've talked about her before, right? Seth Parker Woods, we talked a little bit about off camera. You know, what advice would you have for those who are so dedicated and committed to the Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Bach, right? But are still feeling a little maybe closed off or not as open to experiencing the music of more recent composers who are having such a dynamic impact on listeners' ears?
You know, these are the big questions, you know.
Jeremy, welcome to Unmute the Voices. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you here at Key to Change. And I just have to say, according to your book, I think you mentioned that your parents weren't fans of road trips, right?
We're not.
We're not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So traveling from Seattle to Renton, a little bit of a road trip. So I'm really appreciative of you being here today to have an in-person discussion with me. The last time that you and I spoke was about 3 years ago when I first launched Unmute the Voices. We had a really robust conversation and we talked a lot about people of color in classical music. We talked about the stories of composers and performers who've been marginalized. You shared your interest, of course, about and your love for Nina Simone.
Yeah.
And it was a very vibrant conversation, but not everyone really liked that conversation. Centered mainly around the music that you were playing, which was of Blind Tom specifically, where people were really angry, specifically with me, about me asking you questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Of course, that was during the pandemic, and yet here we are again, where we're kind of at a crossroads here in our country with regards to what does it mean to serve the underserved and people of color, you know, who continue to be marginalized. When you look back on that conversation and you think about kind of current events now surrounding the just dysfunction or even just the dismay that people have around people of color in classical music and amplifying their voices, what do you think of all of that? And what kind of comes to your mind when you read the press and see things that are happening in the country right now?
Well, I know for a fact from my conversations with my faculty colleagues and various people in the music, I don't like to call it industry, in the music world, let's say, you know, there's a lot of still very passionate interest in helping people who have historically been underrepresented. How to help these students or aspiring musicians to find the right teacher, the right situation, to just help them gain a foothold in a very complicated, you know, world. And it's hard enough for, you know, all kinds of kids to come up in the classical music world. And so in the world that I live in, there's not really a backlash. It's complicated sometimes to figure out the right solutions and to advocate the right way, equitably and fairly, and to think about all those issues. It's not as easy as it might seem. The wider world, God, who knows? You know? It is weird the amount of threat that people feel about this issue in some ways. Admittedly, I grew up loving the classical canon, and I still do. Right? And I still think that this music has stuff to offer from a, of course, purely musical perspective, but also from a political perspective. I don't know if we talked about like Mozart as an example last time that we spoke, but Mozart, totally obsessed with dismantling unjust power. Right? His two most famous operas, Don Giovanni and The Marriage of Figaro, are about a comeuppance for an unjust system, right? And he writes his most passionate and amazing music, some of the music we remember the most, for those particular moments, the moment when the Count has to beg his wife forgiveness after all that, after all the scheming, and for the moment when, of course, the commendatore drags Don Giovanni down to hell after. So I guess I don't see, there are some aspects, some elements in the classical music world that see a weird, like classical music against this new perspective. But for me, a lot of my life with classical music, Beethoven, Mozart, particularly, seems to suggest a more broadly humanist perspective, more in keeping with what you're after. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's a terrifying moment in our
but there's other composers right now who are really doing pivotal work in the classical music industry or community. Jessie Montgomery, we've talked about her before, right? Seth Parker Woods, we talked a little bit about off camera. What advice would you have for those who are so dedicated and committed to the Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Bach, right? But are still feeling a little maybe closed off or not as open to experiencing the music of more recent composers who are having such a dynamic impact on listeners' ears?
These are the big questions, For me, for example, Beethoven was about upending the apple cart, right? He was working atop a great tradition. He wouldn't have been able to do what he did without Haydn and Mozart laying the fabric and a certain genre that was already expected. But then he basically destroys it, right? Almost every piece is like a different way of undermining. So I don't know, when I think about new work, that seems to people to be destroying something that is existing, go back to Beethoven. Even Bach, in some ways. Bach was very much a Bach-looking composer in some ways. But then constantly, riding the edge of what was conceivable or possible in a revolutionary way, and crossing the boundaries of genre. I think a lot of people get upset the way that a lot of contemporary classical music, for lack of a better word, is crossing between genres that makes them feel that classical music is being eroded.
So would you say that basically history has repeated itself and that we're basically living, the times of yesterday or a couple of centuries ago now, but just in a completely different form?
Well, there's a lot of recurrences, wouldn't you say? I was reading which I highly recommend, by the way, if you have not read. The New Yorker asked me to come up with a reading list about political division in music. And the first book that I came up with was Gottschalk's memoir. Because everything in Gottschalk's memoir, a lot of his touring is during the Civil War, right? A lot of his musical choices are complicated, right? Some of them are very market-oriented. Some of them are seeking after the muse. Some of it is trying to entertain an American audience in the middle of a massive meltdown of North versus South. A lot of the issues feel like the same issues. That, they get more severe, they get more rabid, they get more feverish, and then there's not to say that there aren't particular problems of today, but I don't know. Classical music has been through this kind of drama before, right? And as acrimonious as it may seem sometimes these days, also there used to be really acrimonious times, right? People wouldn't
They wouldn't dare.
They wouldn't
play.
dare, or in Paris, riots at the Rite of Spring or whatever, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And even just in the sense that people now at least recognize the name of Joseph Bologna, who was the pioneer, the creator of the symphony concertant that had such an influence on, a composer that's more recognizable, like Mozart, right?
Right.
And I believe, Carlos Simon, another one, right? Brilliant composer at the Kennedy Center, right? And just the opposition that he is facing now, Jesse Montgomery, all of these other wonderful composers and also performers who are really having an impact. I believe we're going to be reading about them in history books, decades and even centuries to come.
Those are all really compelling people, and I'm sorry that the world has become so poisonous in a way to this to this activity, which a lot of us have. For me, one of the ones I got passionate about over the last year or two since I spoke to you last.
Yeah.
Hélène de Montgeroul. Do you know her work at all? In a way, she's a very privileged person, but she's basically erased from people's concept of music history. And she saved her own head from the guillotine by improvising on the Marseillaise. She conspired to try to get Marie Antoinette out of France. She ran an incredibly powerful salon. She had many husbands, the last of which was 20 years her junior. She lived a very proto-feminist life. And she was a formidable pianist, and she wrote 120 etudes, and many of which are fascinating.
Wow.
And some of which I feel very strongly Beethoven stole from her a couple things, because everyone knew her, everyone went to her salon, and everyone came through. So this is a long digression, but that activity of unearthing these people who are undersung in the classical music history is still ongoing. For me anyway.
Yeah. Well, speaking of you, your career has just been one that is so inspiring to not only listeners, but to young people and even older people alike who have just really revered you as one of the greatest pianists of the 21st century. When you look back on your career, what's the thing that you would say you are most proud of? And I know there's a lot of accomplishments and there's a lot of things that have occurred, but is there one thing specifically that you look back on and you're like, that was a really great moment for me?
Well, let's see. It's hard to pick the thing that you love the most from all the various, but I guess, when I recorded the Ligeti Etudes, at that time there weren't that many recordings of those pieces. They were played a fair amount. But I somehow had a lucky moment, a kind of a love affair with those pieces. And I immersed myself in them, and we got the right piano and the right recording studio. And that record turned out more or less, what I wanted, which is hard. Some of the hardest music ever written for the piano.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure to this day exactly how it happened. Sometimes in the recording booth, Adam, we'd be editing, and he's like, "Where are we?" I was like, "I actually don't know." I played it, but I have no idea where I am right now. So it's that kind of music where a human being is basically trying to ape a kind of computer, be as almost inhumanly mathematically perfect, and yet at the same time express something. And it's a very complicated music to play. And I don't know, that turned out well. And then, these days I'm very proud of every few months I go up to Toronto and I teach the little, not so little, college kids at the Glenn Gould School, and we have very intense lessons together.
What makes an intense lesson with Jeremy Denk?
Well, I begin to figure out something, like some limiting factor or some blockage or something, some method of understanding, and then once I kind of figure out how to unlock something and the student begins to kind of like awaken out of that thing that they didn't realize was blocked, that can be really amazing. I often say that teaching is the most guiltless pleasure in life because, it's not like you eat something and then you feel guilty afterwards or whatever you might do well, when you share like a phrase with a young pianist, and then they come alive with it, and they begin to find their own identity in it, it's amazing.
How does one know when they have found their own identity as a musician? Like, how do you know when you have found that and you're like, this is who I am? How do you know?
I don't know, you're playing, you're practicing, and suddenly something locks into place. You're like, oh, that's how that phrase goes in my dream version, right? It's like you're something in that beautiful place where like, oh, the time, this wait here and do this and linger on this note and move through, and then suddenly everything is eloquent, right? Like, oh, I'm speaking. And this music, Mozart, whoever it is, they're speaking through me, right?
Is it almost like a spiritual experience? Like someone who goes to church who experiences, I don't know, the Holy Ghost for the first time and they feel like God is speaking through them? Would you say that it's that type of experience? And I'm asking this, I'm obviously a musician, but I'm asking for those who are not musicians, who don't have that experience of really getting to know oneself as an artist, right? What is that experience like?
Yeah. I hear a lot of younger pianists now, and you can feel when they're they have influences, but they're not really of their own voice yet. I don't know, it often happens in sort of late 20s, I feel like, early 30s. It can happen earlier or later. Something happens, and then like a lot of the crud of teaching and the anxiety of being a student falls away, and you begin to take the material that all your teachers gave you, and you begin to, right? Concoct it. I don't know how to describe that to other people who aren't artists exactly, right? It is a weird,
almost like spiritual, right? Or
I suppose you could say, I'm not a religious person per se. My dad was a former monk who became disillusioned with the church. And I think that some of that passed on to me in one way or another.
Out of body experience.
Yeah, if I have a religion, it's definitely music, and it definitely feels, you feel alive, best alive when you're playing and thinking of phrase, There's so many days I would never get through without the first hour of practice in the morning where you begin to hear the music again after coffee, It's like, oh yeah, music is good. Music is really good. And no matter how well known it is to you, it kind of opens something, right? And then the world seems, well, one of my favorite phrases about music is it's an armor against disillusionment. Yeah, it's like when you think you want to be cynical about the world, and rightfully so in many ways.
Yeah. Unmute the Voices is sponsored by Key to Change Studio. Key to Change Studio is a violin and viola studio located in Renton, Washington, which allows middle and high school underserved students living in South King County an opportunity to take violin or viola lessons. For more information, visit their website at keytochangestudio.org. Now, back to Unmute the Voices. One of your fans, who's a colleague of mine, asked me to ask you specifically on a Sunday morning, do you ever go back and listen to any of your recordings while you're enjoying reading the paper? Or do you ever go back and listen to any of your recordings as a listener, not as the creator?
Well, it's impossible for me to separate those. It's very hard for me to listen to old recordings because there's always things you wish
you could have done differently.
Differently, and then you've changed. You're like, who is this person in some ways? But sometimes, happily, you're like, oh, that's pretty great. I wish I could think of that now. That was pretty good. It's the same way with the book too. It's like now I haven't read my book for it was just like completely in my world.
Right.
And now I haven't read it for a couple of years. I haven't looked at a passage of it.
Yeah.
And we were at a party last night and we were looking at some passages like, oh, that's not the way I would put it now, but it's interesting. It's provocative. Right?
If you had to go back and rewrite that book, what would you add or subtract from it?
I would trim it down, but you'd have no idea how much trimming I did already to try to. Yeah.
So there was a lot more that you wanted to add, but trimmed down.
There was. I'll tell you that the editor, who's a great guy, Andy Ward. He's like, I sent him a draft of the first, few chapters, and then there were two conflicting pieces of advice he had. That's always the way teaching is, by the way.
Yeah.
You need this and this, and they seem like they're in conflict, but they're not.
Right.
He's like, well, actually, it's too long, but also at the same time, there's not enough detail. I don't really know enough about you. So the trick is to tell, how do you tell a story of like, how is it really like to be an 11-year-old learning the piano? What do you really remember? How did you really behave, right? Reconstructing that in your mind. It took a lot of time and sort of imagination. And then in COVID, actually, I remembered a lot of things that I couldn't have normally remembered.
Was that just because we were all isolated and kind of left to our own thoughts that you had such reflective memories?
I guess so. I had time. It was a ritual every day, right? Yeah.
So what would you change or add? You'd make it shorter even more, or?
I try to make it a little shorter, yeah. I would. Admittedly, there's some parts I'm perfectly proud of. Yeah. I managed, I thought, to capture my teacher Shebok pretty well. I left out some important teachers. I just ran into this wonderful violinist, Miriam Fried.
Miriam, of course. Yeah.
She was a very important presence in my life, and she didn't make it into the book maybe because it just didn't fit one or another of the narrative threads that I was telling. Like in Oberlin, I sort of organized the whole thing around my friend Darrett's cello teacher, Norman Fisher, finally. This one pivotal scene. I was like, I can write this. I can tell about my weird, screwed up Oberlin self around this person who tried to change me, right? And there's people I left out that I shouldn't have. But,
Okay.
So that's conflicting too. I would make it shorter, but I would add more things.
Add more depth, right? Yeah. More depth too.
More depth, but also there's some figures who play into it interesting ways that I only now realize, right? Were relevant. Maybe I'll write a second addendum. It'll be like the people I left out of my memoir.
Oh, interesting. Well, just kind of reflecting also on your career along with writing the book. I mean, can you talk to me a little bit about what some of your biggest challenges have been and how you've kind of been able to overcome them, moments of your life as a musician?
Well, learning to breathe on stage.
Did you hold your breath?
No, but breathe musically.
Okay. What does that mean?
To give the music the space that it needs to be.
Silence being part of the space?
Silence, but also just, because you get up there and the thread of the music is so compelling, right? And, but sometimes music is about looking around. And so that's a challenge. Also, it's a challenge to know years in advance what you want to play, what you want to do, how you want to organize your.
Yeah.
That part of being a classical musician, I don't really enjoy. I'd much rather just sort of like, program TBA and show up with some pieces that I love.
Because of how you're feeling that day, or
or that few months. I really want to do this right now. But the way that it works is you have to really plan. Seasons in advance.
But do you think that, that's a really interesting perspective, Jeremy. Do you think that presenters could get to a point where they trust the artist so much that if you've had some sort of life-changing event, you're in love, you've maybe experienced heartbreak, or you've written a book, or you've discovered something, that the presenter would say, I trust, in this case, Jeremy Denk so much that if he decides in the next 6 months that he wants to change the program, that we trust him enough that he is going to bring something that is going to be not only refreshing to our listeners, but also life-changing.
Well, I do have some relationships with presenters that are like that.
You do?
But that's hard in the modern world. Audiences like to know what they're going to go hear.
But are they going for the music or are they going for the artist?
It's a
I mean, you've got a
combination.
lot of fans now.
Yeah.
So,
But sometimes, you know, especially in Europe, they're a little bit more desirous of knowing. Also, they have to know because other pianists come and they play other pieces, and you don't want to duplicate things. I mean, it's a whole Tetris puzzle of life. You know, what, you know.
yeah, but wouldn't it be kind of liberating, though, to kind of show up and, I don't know, I mean, Liszt B minor is one of my favorite sonatas, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, you know, I'm feeling very Liszt B minor today. And, you know, I'm having an emotional reaction to, I don't know, what I saw on the news or the conversation I just had with my partner or my best friend. And I am feeling very strongly drawn to this composer or this music. Don't you think that having that liberty to be able to express that emotion on stage would be fun?
I mean, of course, it would be. You know, the nature of classical piano is that you do need several months to prepare a piece. You can't just decide that morning, mostly, unless you have already. You know, those pieces have
Unless
to be.
you're Jeremy Denk. I mean,
Well, no, but you have to. You know, you have to live with them. And learning new pieces gets a little trickier as you grow older, of course,
Sure.
as inevitable. Some things get easier, some things get harder. But you're preaching to the choir here. I would love to live a very improvisatory classical life, in many ways. Yeah.
I mean, classical music is supposed to sound improvisatory, right? At least moments of it.
Well, a lot
If
of
we're
the
talking
great-
Baroque music, especially, right?
A lot of the tradition of classical music was based on improvisation. Sure. Yeah.
So it would kind of give you the freedom.
Yes. You know, believe me, you don't need to convince me. It's the world at large. Yeah.
I'm putting this on record. I'm kind of being your pseudo agent in this sense that no, I'm teasing, but I do think that there is a level of freedom, right, that an artist could have that I think could really bring the listeners into kind of their most sensitive world, right? That if they are feeling a certain way or wanting to express through a piece that maybe they've played 50 or 100 times before and they decide they want to play it, I think that would be liberating.
You know, it's funny because you look at some of the history of touring musicians. Liszt, let's say, one of the most successful. He basically played the same program for 4 years. That's not a luxury that most modern classical pianists have, because you've played something in a certain town. And Gottschalk is similar. He was a huge success, but he basically played the hits, and he had an uncanny ability to know what those pieces might be. The kind of merciless round of every season a new recital or two is a more modern, right? And it's broadening to learn new pieces. It's wonderful to come back to old ones. It's a mix of those things is really great for me. But it's tricky to know. It's tricky to know when you're ready to bring a new baby into the world.
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah. I have one final question for you. What sort of advice would you give for any individual who is feeling uncertain or feeling a little lost right now and doesn't really know which way to turn, but they love and admire you? What sort of friendship advice can you give to those who are experiencing those feelings right now?
I think I wouldn't feel comfortable offering life advice per se. I can offer reasonably good musical advice, I think, at times, to young musicians.
Sure.
And it's not general usually. It's specific to the person, right?
Okay.
So it's hard to answer your question in the abstract, but I'll tell you one thing that I always tell the young musicians that I come across. And it's a piece of advice that I wish I had taken many, many times. Whenever you're practicing and you play something again, decide first what it is you didn't like about the previous time and make a very specific decision what's going to be different and how physically and practically you're going to make that difference happen. To actually say those things out loud and slows down the act of practicing. It cuts down on the insane repetition of the same mistake over and over again, which is one of the ways that we practice in problems, right? I wonder if that's not terrible advice for life in general too, right? For how we go about solving political problems or
Social
problems.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that sort of problem solving is really powerful in practicing. It can be very beautiful too when it never happens that the first idea that you try works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh yeah, do your thumb. No, actually no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's always the 10th or 11th combination of ideas, right?
It's almost that try again.
Yeah,
method,
let's try
right?
again, but it's like each time you learn a little something.
Learning from your mistakes.
You learn
right?
from your mistakes, and
if you don't learn from them, you tend to repeat them, right?
I mean, you can hear a million conservatory pianists doing that all day long. Yeah. And I was definitely one of them. It took me a long time to figure out how to do that well.
Well, I think that's great advice that anyone could take, musician or not.
Actually, Miriam Fried, I think, was the first person who put that in language, clear language for me.
Yeah.
And so I should give her credit for that. And I more or less ignored her when she said it, but then later,
Well, it's interesting. Miriam Fried, fun fact,
yeah.
was the very first teacher I ever played for in a master class.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Very first time.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was thrown into the deep end, literally.
That's pretty intense, yeah. She's an intense teacher. Yeah.
She is, but and this was at a time when she was the first violinist in the Mendelssohn
Right, of course,
quartet.
right.
I had just decided that I couldn't live without music. I had went to school to become an attorney.
Right.
I left at the end of my junior year and started completely over in music. And so I was a baby, really, to music education. And I was the very first student in that masterclass. There were 3 of us, and that was the person I played for first. So it was a really great introduction into music education and classical music.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that. And I mean, she's great. She's a fantastic player and teacher. So
Yeah, she's a phenomenon.
yeah. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
For being here, and it's so nice to chat with you in person. I'm glad that you took time out to come and speak with me.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you as well for joining us on Unmute the Voices. I'm Dr. Quinton Morris. Enjoy your day.